So thank you so much, as I said, for the invite. I've been asked by Claire and Julia to tell the story of the CARiAD work and reflect on what I and we've learned. And I think I might be lucky enough that some of the CARiAD research team members might, if they're not in already, might join. So towards the end, if you want to add anything, that's absolutely fine. I feel privileged to be able to tell at least some of the story on your behalf. So the title is quite deliberately phrased in a positive way. And I know that every of you who've traveled this path will know that often it's quite hard work to positively reframe this type of journey because it can feel really challenging. And of course, I'm trying to lean a little bit on Thomas Edison, and this is what he said: I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work. And we didn't quite find 10,000 ways, but maybe quite a few. So we're not close to 10,000 tries. So for all the lovers of a good reflective practice model, I'm going to try and use or keep myself to Rolf's one, or might do a few cycles through this. And what I want to say is this story isn't new. I think most, if not all of you, will have similar and maybe even better stories of just keeping going. But I'm hoping that when you listen to ours and maybe at that same time reflecting your own, it is still useful, or maybe you just like a good story, that might be useful as well. We know as a team, and certainly for me personally, this is really useful to do this type of reflection. So, and I guess why I say this is, John Dewey said, we do not learn from experience, we learn from reflecting on the experience. So, and this is what this presentation did for me and for us. Or we can use poo. So this is how it opens. Here is Edward Bear coming downstairs now, bump, 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 a bump on the back of his head behind Christopher Robin. It is, as far as he knows, the only way of coming downstairs, but sometimes he feels there really is another way, if only he could stop bumping for a moment and think of it. And I think that's the nice thing with reflective space. So from our team to you that's listening, thank you for allowing us the headspace to stop bumping for a minute. Okay, so we'll start with the what. So I've spent quite a bit of a chapter of my PhD on this aspect. Now I promise to you that I will only summarize, but I need to explain to you the context of telling you the story. It is in the context that this study did get funded subsequently, but not only that, it was also successfully implemented in clinical practice. And I guess that is maybe a vantage point. My story might have sounded a bit differently if it wasn't for those two facts. So, the what? So, this is my PhD chapter in front of me that I will summarize through. So, the first submission we did in this regard was in 2010 for an NIH-RH8 researcher-led funding call. It was the Relief as Needed trial, and we thought the research question is it feasible and acceptable to trial carer-administered fentanyl for breakthrough pain in cancer patients cared for on the care pathway for the last days of life compared to usual care? So let's see whether this comes up. So we thought, like care administration, we were focusing on one symptom, that's pain. We were looking at fast-acting fentanyls, at which at that time it was a new drug. It was given intranasally or sublingually, so not an established route at that time for the last days of life. We thought that cluster randomization by DNT might be a good idea. Yes, we situated it in the community setting, meaning at home rather than in the hospice. And we knew, given all the concerns, including ethical and methodological concerns, it was situated as an external pilot trial. So that one wasn't prioritized for funding. So that was an early stage reject, I want to say. It was literally to say that isn't an important question and that would not be prioritized to go any further. Okay, so we kept working. In 2011, we reworked this for Marie Curie Cancer Care. Again, still the relief trial. The question was unchanged. Still an external pilot trial, clustered at DN level. This time we thought, we need to know a little bit more about what's happening in the UK. So some UK healthcare professional views and also parallel qualitative research in a discrete choice experiment. So funding wasn't awarded. So this time we had much more detailed feedback. They felt we were very ambitious. They were supportive of looking at fentanyl as a new drug, but they were worried about power calculations for the study. They were worried about outcome measures, and thought we should do a lot more background pilot work, and specifically suggested that we should do a small study that demonstrated that carers were able to deliver the drug in a safe way. So it was pretty much the same, just a slight repackaging, but at least now we had more detailed feedback from a funding body. And now there's a few footsteps. I need to stop there. So there's a few years in between here, in between this one and the next one, including 2 maternity leave breaks as well. But all these times, things move on, isn't it? So our thinking moved on as well, because for the new drug, it has a completely different way of titrating it for people. And we were starting to think whether this is really possible to do. So by 2014, again to Marie Curie, we submitted something that was much more early stage work. So this wasn't a trial, this was, let's see whether this comes up. So we still thought, okay, the question is about lay care administration. We'll focus on one symptom, that's pain. But this time, we will look at medicines that's already used, morphine or diamorphine for pain. And towards the very end of life, it's used subcutaneously. So that's the established route. Yes, we'll do it in the community setting. And we will work our way towards a pilot trial. So the outcome of that was very much to design a pilot trial. Okay, so yes, funding wasn't awarded. The funding committee, and this is where the detail of the feedback gets really useful, they agreed that it was a very important question. They commended the public contribution to the project, but again, it was about preparatory work and worrying that recruitment would be feasible, and they would have loved to see some data on whether the recruitment was feasible. And after this panel, I had the privilege at that time to be on one of the HTA prioritization panels. And there was a discussion in one of the panels about a debate really about research into the last months of life care. And it was a really interesting debate because there was a strong feeling in the room that research in that very important time of life, in the last months of life, would only give an average answer, and whether that would be in the best interest of people because they need individualized care. And the counter argument was clearly, if you know the average answer, you know what is safe, and it can be a starting point for individualized care. I can recall the discussion being extremely finely balanced. It could have gone either way, but just at the end of that debate, there was then an agreement in the group that there should be more research about last months of life care. And the NIHR then published what they call a broad brief calling for proposals about last months of life care. So it's to this broad brief that we submitted this study. So this was NIHR HTA researcher-led funding call on the back of a broad brief. And we worked on this one at the same time as another study about how best to manage noisy breathing in the last days and hours of life. So working on those two together also helps a lot about working through the ethics and ethical issues and recruitment issues. But then this is what it resulted in. So the question is about lay care administration. This time, rather than picking off one symptom, we looked at all the commonly occurring symptoms in the last hours of days of life, and in the clinical realm, that's very much a package, the 4 or 5 very common symptoms. So we said, okay, we wouldn't pick off only one. We'll look at all the common symptoms. We'll use established drugs. So what the clinicians usually use, we'll use an established route, which in this country is still subcutaneous, so just under the skin route. Stay in the community setting. This time, the decision was made to go for individual randomization at pilot trial to better be able to learn from that if there's a definitive trial. And that's the one that got funded. Now, I don't know how it feels to you looking at all these footsteps. I know there are there's a number of years in there. We always joke that the gestation period of this was really, really long, but it got better and much more targeted as we went through this. So then we did the study, and I know the focus of our discussion isn't the study. There's another interesting bit on this. So we did the study and then several next steps, hence all the footsteps. But just to give you a little flavor of that context that I've said in terms of it got implemented, just allow me a few minutes to talk you a little bit. There's a tiny bit about the study, but more about the implementation and then what we've learned. So this was the study, CARiAD administration of as-needed subcutaneous medication for common breakthrough symptoms in people dying at home. So there's a study, 2017 to 2019, we did it, and that's our research question. Is it feasible and acceptable in the UK? And of course, the very proud Welsh roots led to the acronym CARiAD. So that's all I'm going to say about the study. About the implementation, so for pandemic planning and at Welsh Government request, we were asked, the clinicians and the researchers working together in North Wales, to lead on urgent All Wales policy development for the practice. So within 1 week in March 2020, literally 7 days, and I know it sounds quite biblical, it resulted in a tailored CARiAD package that comprise a policy and then dedicated training resources and supporting materials. North Wales was the first region in Wales to start implementation. We started straight away in April 2020, and that was very close working between specialist palliative care, primary care, and lay carers. So you might all have an appreciation of just how large North Wales is. So that worked in our favour. So implementing in the whole geography resulted in the first robust real-world UK data set on clinical effectiveness and safety of the practice. And maybe I have skipped over this too quickly. Could you remember that what got funded was a feasibility RCT, and now I'm talking about clinical implementation. So it jumped from feasibility RCT to implementation. And if you want to talk about that later more, I can fill in some of the dots for you. So until March last year in North Wales, we've supported 120 patients with this practice. They had 1,273 CARiAD administered injections. That's median 7 per patient. Clinician support was sought in just under 12% of instances of CARiAD administration. The median medicines administration period was the last 7.5 days of people's lives, with pain the main symptom, followed by anxiety or agitation or restlessness. The practice makes a huge difference. So dying people's symptoms are treated much quicker. So median waits from a symptom needing medicines to them having the medicines is down from 105 to 10 minutes. The practice is safe, so the right medicines are used, the correct doses are administered, medicine stocks tally, and family and friends report feeling empowered and well supported by clinicians, and they really love the opportunity to support a loved one's wish to be at home in this way. They are confident in administering subcutaneous medicines. And here are some examples, just some of our carer voices in terms of how they reflect on their overall experience. So excellent, able to keep my loved one at home, a very good experience. made things much easier, gave me control, a comfort to know I could help, not wait for out-of-hours services. At first nervous, but then felt confident. It gave me comfort knowing that it could help Mum's symptoms. I enjoyed helping with her care. I think there's only about 1 or 2 slides. So we've done lots of work after that, including quality improvement cycles, exploring with my colleague in the room here, the health economics of the practice as well, and also setting up the National Community of Practice for Clinicians that's supported by a dedicated future NHS digital workspace. And also the work in North Wales and in Wales broader has supported the spread of the practice to many areas in the rest of the UK. Also, Bangor University, with help from the Impact Acceleration Funding, we could set up a North Wales CARiAD carers group, and we could also design a training package to train healthcare professionals how to train lay carers in the practice so that our training is more consistent. I think that's about it. I just wanted to put those slides in because it's a great privilege to see it in action, and not only to see it in action, I'm also one of the community palliative care doctors with the privilege of training some of the carers. So it's not only knowing it in practice, it's not only seeing it in practice, it's helping to have it in practice or to keep it in practice. So that is a great privilege, but also that is an important vantage point to understand how I reflect on learning through this path. So I want to say, when I look at all this, I do know, and I didn't share with you the long list of the long way there is to go on this practice. But I do understand that we should look back at how far we've come. So that's the focus for today. But there's a lot more work. So what? See, I got through the what. Now we're on the so what of Rolf. And for this, I will just focus on some of the learning points of the workup. I will stay quite clear of the learning of the trial and the implementation. That's different days. Okay, I think you would have seen through my attempt at building a puzzle all in the same color that test one thing at a time is a big part of what we've learned. Those first questions, looking back, there are just too many things we're trying to test at the same time. So I think looking at proposals now, it is really to try and crystallize it down to the main thing you want to test. I say this, and I know you all know this, design with impact or application in real life always in mind. And I understand that I also knew this very theoretically. I must say, having the privilege of actually seeing the impact in practice has given me a very different vantage point on that specific fact that was to that point more a theoretical concept, and certainly that is feeding into how we design proposals now in terms of really looking ahead towards how will it impact real people, and how would you then get that into practice. Allow time and hold your nerve. I'm so sorry, I clearly have to say this. You all know this. And I try to put some crystals in there to remind me how long it takes to get something crystallized. It certainly took its time to get to a question that was fundable in terms of crystallizing it. And you know, and again, allow me a little bit of, I don't know, a philosophical view on this. Lots of other useful things happened in that same time. And for everybody who's been cited on what was happening in end-of-life care at that time, you might recall the Liverpool care pathway. In that time, all those sort of mechanisms of documentation for care changed as well. And that also impacted in terms of how we frame our question. Now, this is, I think, the reason that Sydney Julia suggested maybe to Claire that I tell this story in terms of the keeping going. I think some people call it learned optimism, and I can't see everybody's faces on here because I'm on one screen, but if I hope at least some of you are nodding. the skill to learn through these research journeys to keep going and to reframe in a positive way. And also maybe the other thing for me of learning is to start appreciating that skill in somebody else and in the team around you. So that's maybe the biggest part, the positive reframing of this. And I think one of my colleagues in Bangor said something really useful that I often reflect on, to say that these processes, when we apply for funding, they are human processes. Just because we get a no doesn't mean the proposal or the team aren't good. It might just be something at that time. So keep going. I understand when I say keep going, there's also wisdom in knowing when to stop. And maybe change path to a different research question. Two things about the people around us. So I said you embrace and make the very most of public contribution. And of course, I am talking to the converted on here in the audience. But again, there's something about the theoretical concept, and then there's something about seeing the value of public contribution in action. And they've added an immense amount of value to the study in terms of the design of the intervention. And then also later on, if I'm allowed to say two things about what happened afterwards. So they also joined us at the Research Ethics Committee and really changed the discussion at the REC and helped us with conference presentations. And now that we are sort of in implementation mode, we've had the privilege of carers with experience actually telling the story, whether that is for the media or for some of the other comms. And we have learned that their way of telling the story is so much more valuable even than one of the clinicians or the researchers telling the story. So we've gained a lot of benefit from good public contribution. Surround yourself with the right people. I am the beneficiary of a fantastic team around me. So I know this work is only done in teams. So thank you to all the team members here, and maybe anybody listening to the recording afterwards. Thank you very much for everything we've learned from each other, but also that the stability of a great team and great mentorship is amazing. So I think it's at this point that I wanted to just check. I want to go look at the list of people that's here just to ask whether any of the other team members of CARiAD, I know I might jump this on some colleagues, just if anybody wanted to share a little bit more, either now or later, please put your hand up or let me know in terms of whether you take a slightly different vantage point on learning through this. I know Claire Wilkinson wasn't able to make it. And then I've only got 2 slides, and then I'll open the floor for questions. Is that okay? So it's deliberately short. Now what? There are so many things CARiAD related in the pipeline, and it's influenced how we approach other applications. But for now, and seeing that I've already been through Winnie the Pooh and a bit of Charlie Mackesy, well, I'll leave you with this. What has taught you the most? Asked the boy. Failure, said the horse. So try not to fear it. So that's my take-home message for this, and I shall stop sharing and open the floor for questions.